Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video, ATP Geopolitics, with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Frontline update for the 2nd of January 2023. There has been a couple of really big bits of news overnight that I'm going to start with. And the first one is a huge hit on a school number 19, I think it was, in Makiivka. So Makiivka is this sort of part of Donetsk city, another, I suppose, a conurbation of Donetsk city and Makiivka here. That's why I believe it's happened, that Makiivka. There are a number of different Makiivkas. This is being widely reported everywhere, mainstream media, all over the socials, etc., 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 because it was huge. So this strike on school number 19 in occupied Makiivka is tearing apart the Russian military bloggers, says this source. They were promised Ukraine would be destroyed on the 1st of January 2023, and instead all 45 Shaheeds were intercepted. I'll talk about that in a second, and Ukraine vaporized hundreds of Mobics in their sleep. And this is the video that he provides of some serious wreckage of what used to be a school, but it wasn't a school. They weren't hitting a school. They were hitting a barracks of Russian mobilized troops, but underneath the barracks was an ammunition storage. I mean, I'm not like, it's terrible. There's human deaths involved here, but just thinking of the, the thought processes of the Russians here. Yeah, let's put up to 600, maybe 700 people, and let's house them above, an ammunition storage. It's just insane. As Tendar says, the Russian base in Makiivka is but dust. HIMARS have delivered absolute carnage and expected response for the Russian Shahed terror attack on New Year's Eve, and the newest reminder that no matter where Russians position themselves, they are not safe. Tim White says, even some pro-Russian channels and bloggers are saying that the school destroyed housed newly mobilized recruits. Some have mentioned 600 being stationed there. As Russian media reports, 15 people were injured in Makiivka in a series of shelling and with HIMARS rockets. So that's a TASS state news agency. According to preliminary reports, over 15 people suffered wounds, the official told the outlet. But in reality, it looks far worse than that. As it turned out, in the 19th school in Makiivka, there was a warehouse with ammunition in the basement, and the commanders of the Russian army settled their 600 plus soldiers on it. And this is a translation from a Russian source saying 60 to 100 killed, I think, says Evgeny Lazarev. But then yesterday I was in the hospital. They were transporting the wounded in batches. One of the soldiers said out of 600, God forbid, 100 were left. And in the morning, they were still driving out of the rubble of the body. There was a warehouse in the basement. So obviously that's a Google translation of what was said there. But Igor Strelkov, who is a very famous Russian military blogger, Igor Gherkin, also known as, talked about him before, used to be in charge of the separatist military in the Donbass in 2014. Such Russian sources as Igor Strelkov writes that the building was completely destroyed due to the detonation of ammunition, which was located in the same building that was hit. He also states that almost all military equipment standing near the building was destroyed. And here he says, I received information about the defeat of the object around the 1st of, what's that? 1st of December. That should be, he's got the date wrong there, 1st of January 2023, at 1 in the morning. The facility which housed the Nth Division, consisting mainly of mobilized citizens of the Russian Federation, was almost completely destroyed as a result of the detonation of the BC stored in the same building. Almost all the military equipment that stood right next to the building, without the slightest sign of disguise, was also destroyed. In terms of the number of victims, there are still no final figures, since many people are listed as missing, remained under the rubble. In any case, the number of dead and wounded goes to many hundreds. Approximate numbers of 200s, that's a code word for dead, are available, but I will not voice them. As Noel report says, it turns out that the mass death of the Russian military on New Year's Eve happened not only in Makiivka, but also in Sadova and Avdivka. Over 50 servicemen are reported killed there, so not just in Makiivka here. So it looks like the Makiivka hit might well have taken out anywhere up to I don't know, 500 servicemen, 500 Russian soldiers. Or the number of dead and the number of wounded, not sure the exact figures there, but many hundreds of dead are thought, many hundreds are thought to be dead. And that's according to a whole variety of sources, apart from Russian state media. And yeah, that's of little surprise. But that's a huge hit, Makiivka. So that's the biggest bit of news, and the one that lots of people are talking about, understandably. Then, as well, last night there were something like there are different claims, maybe 39 Shahed drones. I think Zelensky said 45 drones, but we have had consecutive nights of drone attacks, and they go at night because they're harder to see. It's as simple as that. So when you got slow moving, quite noisy drones, flying them in the daytime, they can be taken out by Gepards. They can be taken out by heavy machine guns, or even often by, or sometimes by, small arms fire. So the Russians have worked out, when we're going to send these Shahed drones, we need to do it at night. And last night, all of 100% of them apparently were shot down, including 2 all-land drones and a cruise missile as well. So a single cruise missile, which is odd. Why would they send a single cruise missile? The only thing that I think of is that they really are struggling with stocks. I have no idea why they do that. Here you see again 39 kamikaze drones in Russia's 2nd of January night attack on Kyiv. This is a third consecutive, that should be, Russian night drone attack on Ukrainian civilians. All drones were reported shot down, but a fire broke out at Dnipro. A 19-year-old was injured, and a power object damage in Kyiv. So quite often the debris that comes down does still cause some damage. Eastern Air Command says it shot down a KH-59 and Mark II high precision guided missile. So yeah, they just don't know why that would be sent on its own. Here is I think this is in Kyiv, attempts to shoot down the Shahed, and possibly successful, I don't know, but just
Я
kind of
вижу, тихо.
what it looks like with these tracer bullets, or maybe proximity fuses, or whatever rounds. And this gives you a sense of what it must feel like to live in, say, Kyiv, with these constant waves of Shahed drones, and how you just must feel on edge all the time there. But also in Voronezh in Russia, the Baltimore airfield where Su-34 bombers are based. I think it's an airfield that didn't used to get used, but is now being used. There is apparently an explosion there. Now, the Russians are saying a reconnaissance drone was shot down near there, but other claims there's a big explosion that you can hear on various different videos. You can't see it. There's only audio of it, as far as I'm aware. And some people saying there's a massive fire at the location. Be interested to see what details come out about that. Again, we are seeing claims of Russian airfields being attacked in Russia, and this is must be really annoying the Russians, as they won't feel as comfortably safe as they were. And okay, it's only the odd drone attack, rather than the waves that Russia are sending across into Ukraine. Philip O'Brien, this is a different story. One more story of the same type. He says, this one is really interesting. Russians are already using missiles that were made in the 4th quarter of 2022. That means they are basically out of stockpiles. Ukrainians are going to great length to track Russian production. I suggest you all go and watch Perrin's latest video talking about ammunition, particularly howitzer ammunition, and the trouble that both Russia and Ukraine are having in terms of stocking their howitzers with much needed ammunition. Fascinating. Actually, I talked about this the other day, and Perrin basically puts all the meat on the bones to what I was saying, which is that there are ammunition issues. That the Russians are firing less than they would normally do, and they have done throughout this war. And as a result, you can only conclude that they are running low on stockpiles. And there's loads of variables involved in the production of these. And he looks in detail at that. I mean, I think the conclusion was that Russia could create enough to use 6,000 a day. So it's not like they're going to run out and they'll have none left and that's it. And suddenly one day they won't be able to fire anything. But what happens is you just scale back what you fire, and you can fire only as much as you can manufacture. And he suggests that that would be around 9,000 a day, where they were firing 60,000 a day. So this is more than a sixth, somewhere between a sixth and a seventh of what they were previously firing, which changes the way they do their, military offensives. It changes the way they fight. Their doctrine will not be adhered to in the way it would have been at the beginning of the conflict, where they flatten places and then go in and with a bunch of troops and take over the rubble. Now, if you look at Bakhmut compared to other places, and how long it's taken to take that, and the fact that they haven't just completely flattened it is I think a sign that they have dwindling stocks, and they're going to have to think carefully about how they use them. The same goes for Ukraine, but Ukraine has the advantage of having the rest of or much of the rest of the world being able to support uh, them with production of ammunition of varying sort of type. And there are many countries that can be that could aid there, and if some of the countries don't want to provide Ukraine up front, they can provide other countries with backfill, and those countries can provide Ukraine. And so, therefore, you can see uh, Ukraine possibly withstanding an ammunition crisis uh, better than Russia. But anyway, go and check Perrin's video out; really good. And that brings me on to the figures. I'd normally start with these, but I just wanted to give you the Makiivka story because that may affect the figures. It doesn't look like they've adapted today's figures to that, but tomorrow's you might see a severe uptick in Russian personnel. I mean, because that was a huge hit. Anyway, liquidated personnel 720, so still on the slightly higher than average, I guess. 9 APCs, 6 artillery systems, 44 drones, 5 vehicles, and fuel tanks. So the drones high because of these repeated drone attacks are happening every night at the moment. Those figures are, I guess, fairly bad for Russia, but you could see them getting much worse tomorrow. Anyway, let's move on to the front lines. So, as ever, we'll go to the northeast, to the Kupiansk-Svatiove-Kreminna front line, as you can see here. On my map, that looks like this, and we're going to go to this Kupiansk sector first. Really, on this whole front line, actually hardly any news at all. One thing that is worthy of note, up in the Tavolzhanka Dvorichna area around Liman Pershi, Vilshana, and Persha Travnevi. So there have been Russian shelling of Vilshana and Persha Travnevi, which again means there's probably Ukrainian presence there somewhere. It's always difficult to know whether there's shelling in there or near there and what that exactly means. But the deep state maps, this is a pro-Ukrainian map showing that the only change, I mean, this is the only change on the entire front line actually, is over the single day from the 31st to the 1st. So maybe a day lag there, is that this front line from Liman Pershi to Dvorichna sort of straightened up. It did look like that. Now it looks like that. Not really an awful lot of difference, I guess. No Reports says that footage appeared from Russians reportedly withdrawing from Novoselivska. So there is that. There's also written confirmation of this, shared by Vladimir Novikov, leader of the Zaporizhian militia. Fighting reported near Orliansky by the Russian MOD. Lately, Vilshana, Posha, Travnevi was shelled a lot also. So just to put that into context, there's Orliansky. So we hadn't heard for a couple of weeks of fighting around here. I was talking yesterday about how I hadn't heard of anything around Orliansky and Yahidny as well. So there's this little bridgehead that the Ukrainians were able to gain as they pushed to the east, south of Orliansky. But again, just haven't heard much about that. Anyway, Orliansky's back on in the news there. Kuzmivka, Novoselivska here. I talked about how that's been liberated by the Ukrainians. That's confirmation that that has happened from the Russian sources. But other than that, literally hardly anything about this front line of note. There's very little news from Russian sources and indeed Ukrainian sources. Defmon here says the Ukrainians repulsed an attack around Makiivka. That seems to happen every single day. Russian MOD reports fighting in the area of the Magenta Polygon, I believe. Overall, Ukraine is making incremental gains in the Svatiove area. So Svatiove, he seems to think there's a lot of fighting, as I was saying, in the Orliansky area, Yehidne, but also Makiivka as well, which is further down south, just kind of southwest of Svatiove. No, sorry, just exactly to. Sorry, I was thinking that's Svatiove, just to the west of Svatiove. So that's that. Makiivka there, Svatiove there. As we come further down south, the usual kind of claims around repelled attacks on Chervonopopivka and north of Bilorivka. I'll talk about that in a second. There's no proof, but my gut feeling says that the Ukrainians have increased its area of control north of Bilorivka and close to Shiplivka, and south of Kreminna, no changes that we are aware of. Okay, let's look at that on my map. So here we have Chervonopopivka, normal claims of repelled attacks. There seems to be quite a bit of stasis there recently. British intelligence today reported on the importance of the P66 or R66, depends how you translate the Cyrillic alphabet. Really not very... just a bit behind the times of British intelligence report today. Just a couple of paragraphs. It's a bit like they're getting over the New Year's celebration. Misspelt Kreminna. But they say that this is a hugely important road and is key to the whole area, Kreminna as well. Yes, of course, it's what we talked about the whole time, but I'm not quite sure why they decided today was the day to say that. They had nothing else to say, maybe. Bilorivka, if we come further down, just down south of Kreminna, so no information really coming out about this area. But Bilorivka, it could be that the Ukrainians have actually made some gains just to the north a little bit towards Shiplivka. Shiplivka was hit, the center of Shiplivka was hit, I think, by Ukrainian artillery yesterday. The deep state map where said they've seen no changes on that front line over the last couple of days, apart from up near Kupiansk, where I was just showing you. But around here, around Bilorivka, if you look here, from the day before, over the last week, there's been some sort of small gains around just north of Bilorivka, but hardly anything really to report. However, there are some claims, as you see from no reports, that possibly some gains around here to the north of Bilorivka. There was some worry that the Russians were making some incursions south of Bilorivka. Haven't heard anything about that since then. So I guess we continue to move further south towards the Bakhmut area. Oh, actually, one further thing to say, which comes from War Mapper, and I've not seen this anywhere else really. So talks about they say Bilorivka is contested, which is odd because I've just literally been saying that they're doing fairly well just north of there. And War Mapper doesn't usually make these kind of big claims. And Kamazinivka, which is up towards Svatiove, is now contested. Again, I've heard nothing about that, and that comes from War Mapper. So I don't know. It's a little bit odd. So that's this settlement here is contested between Novovodyanne and Kovalivka. So yeah, I don't know. Just it kind of came out of the blue, that one, because War Mapper doesn't often do these individualized maps, but might be worth me looking into that today, and I'll let you know if there's anything in that. As we come down south towards Bakhmut, not a lot of news about any of these settlements, Berestova or even Verkhnokamianka, where there was quite a bit of activity around here sort of a week ago. Not heard anything since around Spirina. We come down to Yakovlivka. There are some claims that the Russians really are pushing just to the south of Vasily here, and also that they've kind of joined up a little bit with attacking from Yakovlivka down and helping out down south to Soledar. There's a rebar map that's come out that indicates this, as you can see from the inset up here, that Yakovlivka and Soledar, they're sort of moving out, like I talked to you the other day, actually 3 directions from Yakovlivka, north, kind of northwest, and towards the south, towards Soledar, or southwest towards Soledar. So that is the activity there. They have troop movements for the Ukrainians, and wounded getting evacuated, reinforcements coming in, and so on and so forth. But really, it's about Soledar, Yakovlivka, Pidorodny a little bit, and a little bit down here towards Klishchivka, but actually that's area I'd already had under Russian control anyway. What do other sources say? Just to give you an idea on my map first, though. So this is this area here, Yakovlivka and Soledar. There is fierce fighting in Soledar. That's absolutely certain. Still unsure about what's going on in to the east of Bakhmut. I really haven't changed my maps, other than the claims of some captured area, or recaptured area for the Russians in terms of the forest there, or that bit of wood. But I've got that down anyway. And then we come down to Opitny, Klishchivka. This is the area that Rebar says that the Russians now control. I've already had that, broadly speaking. Kupiansk and Ozarianivka there. So before we go on to some of the sources, let's have a look at what things are looking like and in Bakhmut. And this is the Russians using the TOS-1 heavy flamethrower system, which is a pretty awful thermobaric piece of artillery and horrible ordnance that causes a lot of that's pretty horrible. So that's in the Bakhmut area somewhere, not sure exactly where. That looks, obviously around here you don't have any building, and then it goes straight away into sort of higher-rise buildings there. So I don't know if that's Bakhmut itself or somewhere like Soledar or Bakhmutska. But yeah, them trotting out the TOS-1 heavy flamethrowers are not good news for the Ukrainians. There are unconfirmed reports that the Ukrainians near Kupiansk took back some ground. This is purely based on Russian channels moaning about setbacks there. Russia still pushes east towards Pidorodny. Fighting east of Soledar continues. Defmon says Ukrainians repulse attacks around Soledar, Bakhmutska, Bakhmut, and Ozyornivka. There might be some minor Russian gains north of Bakhmut, so the Soledar area, Yakovlivka. But it seems the Ukrainians might have pushed back the Russians slightly in the Ozyornivka area. Andrew Perpetua says situation in Soledar is not great. Very intense fighting, probably almost certainly the most intense area in Ukraine at the moment. High casualties. Both Ukraine and Russia reinforce these positions to the extent that it will be a pretty big fight for the days or weeks to come. So that's that area just there, just really intense, and that's pretty apocalyptic looking. I have seen lots of footage or stuff that I can't show here at all because it's too sensitive and inappropriate. But I've seen so much footage, predominantly of Russians littering these fields in trenches, getting just repeatedly hit with drone drop munitions. The Russian dead around here, and I assume the same to some extent is going on with the Ukrainians. It's just phenomenal. These are killing fields, and this Bakhmut will go down in history as just a terrible aspect to this war, and a really horrible part of the front line here. But otherwise, Bakhmut Central itself, no real change. A little bit in Pidorodny maybe, but no real change. Or Pitny, not heard anything about that, or Ivangorod either. And that's from Warmapper there. Let's move on south, but there isn't an awful lot of news really going into Avdivka and Marinka. Sorry, I actually forgot to point out that the Ukrainians could be pushing around Ozarianivka here and Kupiansk. I said that they have pushed into northwestern outskirts of Kupiansk, possibly. I said that yesterday. Well, the reports continue that there could be some advances of the Ukrainians around here. But as we come down further south, really, I mean, it's interesting when sources compile or accumulate all of this front line into one report, really. So here we've got no report saying General Staff since a while reported that Vuhledar has been attacked, probably shelling or tank fire. Avdivka, Krasnohorivka, Marinka, and Novomakiivka were shelled. Fighting in Marinka continues without changes. The city is ruined. And that is, all they have to say on that. Again, Defmon, the Ukrainians repulsed attacks around Marinka and Pobjeda. Not much of interest is coming out of Marinka since the Russians stopped lying about progress there, which I find quite interesting. But says really nothing about Avdivka at all. So yeah, just a real lack of, and again, this could be the whole New Year situation. There are just so few sources at the moment. Institute for the Study of Wars taking a day off, and they are really good at accumulating, aggregating loads of Russian sources. But even Rebar have gone quiet. Other Russian sources are fairly, sparse at the moment in what the claims are. And yeah, so there's just repelled attacks. Pobjeda, just south of Marinka, repelled attack there. Marinka seems to be part of the course. Novomakiivka, shelling, and Vuhledar, as no report says, may even be getting hit by tank fire. Now, if that's the case, this then fits into what Perun was saying about lack of ammunition. So it depends what ammunition you're talking about, and there's the idea that actually the Russians have quite a lot of tank ammunition left, but they don't have a lot of howitzer ammunition, or they're running low on those stocks. So you might start seeing tanks being used to do the work of howitzers. The problem is that, as Perrin also said, tank barrels don't last as long. And so if you overuse tank barrels, that becomes a bit of a problem going forward, where, the rate of fire can be higher for howitzers. They've just got, thicker barrels and whatnot. So, yeah, it could be that they're using tanks to attack Vuhledar precise. And there was this claim the other day that they've taken ammunition from this area to move it up to the Bakhmut area because they're low on ammunition up there for howitzers. So again, if they are hitting Vuhledar with tanks, you piece these bits together like sort of a jigsaw to try and work out, what is exactly going on. If we look at the this Zaporizhia line, I talked to you yesterday about possibly Dorozhnyanka swapping hands. Defmon here says that I have changed Dorozhnyanka from captured to contested. So he actually had it captured by the Russians, taking on what the Russian sources were saying, such as Rebar, Wolgonzo. Russian MOD reported it was captured yesterday, but there seems to now be conflicting reports on Wolgonzo. So he's got it as just contested. I've pretty much kept it as it is because of there being right from the beginning conflicting reports about that. But anyway, that could be an area of contest there. I'm sure it probably is, but I'll leave my maps as they are for now. Just wait for the dust to settle. As for anywhere else, usual sort of shelling. Kherson is taking an awful lot of shelling. Some interesting satellite imagery coming out, actually showing the difference between I think an April satellite image of the Kimburn spit, possibly, or no, an area of the peninsula somewhere, and comparing it with now to show that now it's there are lots of pock marks. In other words, this is being shelled. There are attacks and I showed you some videos talking about that recently, or a video talking about that recently. So they are going to be attacking the peninsula with their artillery. On the flip side, Ukraine, Ochakiv does get repeatedly hit by artillery itself, and that's still continuing. But anyway, as I say, not a lot of news really for me to report. So I mainly concentrated on that hit on Makiivka and the drone attack again from last night. Anyway, thanks so much. You take care. Please check out my Ukraine War Update extra video that I'll hopefully bring out later. And all the ways you can support my channel are in the description below.